You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday 6th of October 2014. UKIP defend use of child grooming scandals for political gain ahead of Haywood and Middleton vote. 2,356 reports of missing kids in Tayside. Lancashire Councillor's special briefing to avoid another Rotherham. Police raid unlicensed Islamic school in East London. Lloyds Bank set to axe thousands of jobs and close down more branches as it goes digital. Ibrahim Master, Lancashire's Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, investigated. Hong Kong democracy protests fade, face test of stamina. Vladimir Putin's approval rate is still near an all-time high. Thought for the day, Eureka, I'm not a racist bastard. And finally, a few simple truths. UK News. UKIP defend use of child grooming scandals for political gain ahead of Haywood and Middleton vote. UKIP hopeful John Bickley has defended his use of leaflets about child grooming scandals in Rotherham and Rochdale following accusations he has drawn racial battle lines for political gain. The candidate was joined by party leader Nigel Farage to canvass residents at a shopping centre in Middleton ahead of the by-election next week. A father of a child who was a victim of gangs in the Rotherham area has condemned the Cheshire-based politician's actions and accused him of using BNP-style tactics to win the seat. Mr Bickley told "We live in a free country. There is clearly an issue for many years in a lot of northern cities where predominantly young, white, vulnerable girls are being exploited, groomed, raped, trafficked, and no one wanted to talk about it because it wasn't politically correct. It didn't fit in with the multicultural experiment pushed by Labour, and we've seen the outcome of that in Rotherham, where at least 1,400 girls have been found to be abused, but no one was speaking up for them. I am not yet aware of any Labour politicians who have fallen on their swords and local council members, and we're here to talk about it because people here are very annoyed. This is nothing to do with racial divides. This is about what happened. We live in one country where we have one law and everyone should be treated equally and fairly. The father of the main prosecution witness in the Rotherham child sex grooming scandal has accused Nigel Farage's party of exploiting the issue for political gain. The man, whose daughter's testimony led to the prosecution of 9 Asian men and an overhaul of Crown Prosecution Service rules, said that UKIP should stop using BNP-style tactics which are adding to the distress of local families. The BNP received 7% of the vote in the constituency in the last general election after more than 3,000 people voted for the BNP. World at 8. I would have thought having your daughter abused was much more distressing to families than trying to stop it. Of course, many of these families live next door to the abusers thanks to our lack of border control. 2,356 reports of missing kids in Tayside in just 3 years. More than 2,000 missing children reports have been filed in Tayside in just 3 years. The figure was revealed following an investigation by the Dundee Telly into the scale of the issue in the region. The figures include a 1-year-old girl in Monfyth, a 2-year-old from Kirriemuir and 5 3-year-olds from Dundee and Perth. However, the majority of cases involve older children often running away from home. The total 2,356 cases since April 2011 means that, on average, 15 young people are reported missing to the police every week in Tayside. Laurie Matthews, manager at the Dundee-based 18 and under charity, was alarmed at the high number of kids running away from home. She said that's a lot of children going missing, and it begs the question, why are these young people so unhappy they have to run away from home? I suspect abuse is the reason in a lot of cases, and I mean abuse of them rather than mum or dad being violently abused. I also think that the true extent of children running away will be higher than these figures show, because many just won't be reported missing by neglectful parents. Although there were several thousand children missing reports, there are an estimated 963 different individuals, suggesting that many run away more than once. Lancashire Councillors' special briefing to avoid another Rotherham. Lancashire County Councillors are being reminded they are responsible for ensuring the Rotherham and Rochdale gang grooming scandals are not repeated in the authority area. A group of elected members will attend a special briefing session on Thursday, October the 9th, on child sexual exploitation. Details of a rolling programme of training were revealed after Blackburn with Darwin announced a new drive to remind its councillors of their responsibilities towards vulnerable young people. In March 2008, following the Lancashire Telegraph's Keep Them Safe campaign, the borough set up the Engage team with Lancashire Police to tackle child sexual exploitation and a growing threat of girls being groomed by gangs of often Asian older men. It was extended to Hyndburn and Ribble Valley, Burnley, Pendle and Rossendale. County Council Children's boss Matthew Tomlinson said, "We have a clear and robust approach to tackling the issue of child sexual exploitation. 3 multi-agency teams have been created, one for each police division, which include police, health, social care and voluntary agencies who work closely together to help protect our children and young people from being sexually abused." We also have a rolling programme of briefings and updates for county councillors. World date. What are they doing for the thousands that have already suffered? Any financial recompense from the Muslim communities? Perhaps they should be sued by Nazir Afzal under the U-Tree banner and get a lot of nasty publicity for their communities. Police raid unlicensed Islamic school in East London. Counter-terrorism officers had raided an unlicensed Islamic school operating out of a back street in East London with links to the extremist group Al-Muhajirun and a controversial Islamic radical. Officials at Tower Hamlets Council and the Department for Education fear the Sadiq Academy may be operating as an unregulated school beneath its guise as a tuition centre offering subjects including Arabic and Islamic studies. In the raid last week, police arrested Mizanur Rahman, also referred to as Abu Bara, whose radical activities date back a decade. He was later released on bail. Rahman had previously been identified with the Sadiq Academy and had told safety inspectors who visited the centre that he was its manager. Last month, The Guardian revealed that Rahman was given a live online talk promoting the virtues of ISIS goals. Asked about his connection to the school, Rahman did not comment. The school was closed on Friday afternoon and no one could be reached for a comment. Tower Hamlets tipped off the D.of.E. in the summer about the centre's operation and Rahman's involvement. In a letter, the council said it had concerns about the possibility that a child attending the Sadiq Academy may also be subject to an inappropriate curriculum. A council spokesperson said the council has reported its concerns about this tuition centre to the D.of.E. As local education authority, Tower Hamlets Council has no jurisdiction over non-maintained schools or private tuition centres. Officials became concerned at the numbers of children attending the centre in Shadwell, with 2 rooms full of children aged between 5 and 10, as well as another group being taught in a hallway. It rejected planning permission for the building to be used for education. Assuming appeals are turned down, Sadiq Academy would be forced to leave. A D.of.E. spokesman said, "We are aware of the police investigation in relation to the Sadiq Academy and it would be inappropriate to comment further while that continues. It is an offence for a school to operate without being registered. The police in Ofsted have the power to enter premises where they believe that full-time education is being illegally provided to children of statutory school age." Word at 8. Bloody ridiculous allowing such schools to exist in this country. These kids should be in their own countries getting educated, not ours. Lloyds Bank set to axe thousands of jobs and close down more branches as it goes digital. Lloyds is set to close down more branches and axe thousands of jobs, it was reported, as it continues with its digitisation strategy. The bank, which is 25% owned by the state, is expected to cut jobs in its mortgage processing and new account processing divisions, The Times' Harry Wilson reported. The axe is said to be part of the bank's 3-year plan to digitise and automate its business as workers are increasingly replaced by computers and would add to the 30,000 jobs lost since the financial crisis. Banks have been closing down branches over the past years, causing difficulties for customers, especially amongst residents and small businesses of rural communities, with some small towns left with no bank branches at all. Banks often claim they are forced to close branches due to falling numbers of customers visiting as more people use online banking. World at 8. The trouble with shoppers and all the world going digital is what happens when there's a power cut. Once things are gone, they're gone in the real world. Ibrahim Master, Lancashire's Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, investigated. Lancashire's Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, PCC, is being investigated over claims of misconduct. The Independent Police Complaints Commission, IPCC, said it was looking into Ibrahim Master's actions in relation to a domestic incident. After the incident in August, police arrested a 49-year-old man from Blackburn and 2 other men were spoken to about alleged harassment. Mr Masters, 56, was not arrested and strongly denies any misconduct. On Facebook he wrote, "I welcome an open, transparent, fair and impartial investigation by the Independent Police Complaints Commissioner because I know I haven't done anything wrong whatsoever and I strongly deny any misconduct. I am satisfied that any investigation will support this and that I will be fully vindicated at the end of all this." The PCC watchdog, the Police and Crime Panel, referred the matter to IPCC in accordance with regulations after it was contacted by Lancashire Police. An IPCC spokesman said, "We are conducting an assessment to determine whether the matter is something that requires an investigation involving the IPCC." The 49-year-old man who was arrested as part of the domestic incident investigation has been bailed pending further inquiries. A Lancashire Police spokesman said, during the course of the investigation, 2 other men aged 56 and 58 from Blackburn voluntarily attended a police station and were spoken to about alleged harassment. They have not been arrested and inquiries are continuing into this aspect of the investigation. The police spokesman and the Chief Constable referred to a complaint over the conduct of Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner Ibrahim Master in relation to an ongoing police investigation to the Police and Crime Panel. Lancashire Police and Crime Commissioner Clyde Grunshaw said, as this matter is ongoing, it would be inappropriate for me to comment further at this time. World at 8. Well, this guy has the right name not to be brought to task anytime soon, so he can rest easy. Blackburn is now very aptly named in it. No European news, I'm afraid, today. World news. Hong Kong democracy protests face tests of stamina. Pro-democracy protests in Chinese-controlled Hong Kong subsided on Monday as students and civil servants returned to school and work after more than a week of demonstrations, but activists vowed to keep up their campaign of civil disobedience. Protesters lifted a blockade of government offices in the heart of the city, which had been the focal point of their action, which initially drew tens of thousands onto the streets. The civil servants were allowed to pass through protesters' barricades unimpeded. By late Monday afternoon, about 100 protesters remained in an area that houses offices for international banks as well as the main stock exchange, although some students on campus remained defiant and promised to return after classes in the evening. The protesters remained a stalemate with Leung's government and there was no sign of movement on talks that was proposed to end the standoff. The protests have ebbed and flowed over the past week, with people leaving the streets overnight to return later. The test on Monday will be whether that pattern continues in the face of the government's determination to get Hong Kong back to work. Facing separatist unrest in far-flung Tibet and Xinjiang, Beijing is fearful that calls for democracy in Hong Kong could spread to the mainland. The Communist Party leadership has dismissed the Hong Kong protests as illegal, but has left Leung's government to find a solution. World at 8. Of course they didn't last the test of time. Finances rule heavily in the Chinese ethos, and anything that interferes with that and food is verboten. Nothing must interfere with the Chinese money machine, not human rights, not animal rights, and not even common sense. Vladimir Putin's approval rate is still near an all-time high. Given all the nasty headlines coming out of Russia, The Economist's latest was a straightforward Russia's economy on the edge of recession, and the very real deterioration in a broad range of economic and financial indicators, one would be forgiven for thinking that the Russians were souring on their country's recent experimentation in conducting an aggressive and openly anti-Western foreign policy. The mainstream thinking, with which I should note I am in partial agreement, goes something like the following. Russians understand that Putin has been making all of the decisions with regards to Ukraine and that he has been instrumental in provoking the ongoing confrontation with the European Union and the United States. To the extent that their country's economy deteriorates because of Western sanctions and also because of a general decline in its attractiveness to foreign investors, Russians will hold Putin responsible. So in essence, 1. Putin provoked the conflict in Ukraine, 2. The conflict in Ukraine hit Russia's economy, and 3. The decline in the economy is and will be understood as Putin's fault. The problem is that in the 6 months since Russia annexed Crimea and transformed what had been a domestic Ukrainian crisis into an international one, Putin's approval numbers haven't moved down at all. According to the Levada Centre, Russia's leading independent pollster, they are actually up about 4% higher now than they were back in April, the month when the nationalist euphoria over the return of Crimea was at its peak. Thought for the day. Eureka! I am not a racist bastard. Eureka! I am no longer a racist bastard. I have resigned from the BNP. Only joking, of course, in relation to all members of the BNP being racist bastards, because of course they're not. A few could be classed as that, but for the most part, and now being an ex-member of the party, I can now comment fairly freely on my past 10 years, but won't go into detail. Just to say that I am glad I had those 10 years in the British National Party as it once was, and saw the pinnacles we reached just after the EU election. We had good men around, and although many of them drifted off, and in doing so not only took their expertise with them, but some were frankly vicious in their leaving, and although much of which they said came to pass, it is only human nature to reject some truths when it affects the party you've grown to love. I have met some wonderful people in the BNP, many of whom have now left or been expelled, and with them goes the hope that we all had of a united nationalist movement once more becoming the norm in the UK. To say I'm sad is an understatement, but the future is the future, and we must, as a people and a movement, move on as the copper said to the prosy. As I stated in my resignation email on another address, as they have frozen the SE1s without reason, I no longer want to work with or for people whom I no longer respect, and this is true. But of course it is a personal thing, so now we'll get on with no longer being regarded as a knuckle-dragger, but of course this label might well stick, but I hope not. I may be no longer an official racist, but of course nothing alters my views as a nationalist and a committed one. That is, committed, not committable one, although of course that is also a personal opinion. But in truth I have never been what is known as a racist. True, I cannot stand the multi-ethnic duplicity of this country and its media, nor the ever-growing swathes of ethnic black spots overtaking most of this small island now. Nor can I sit back without swearing at the two-faced Italians and French churning African and Arab immigrants onto our shores with monotonous regularity, and having British holidaymakers give them coffee and money whilst I'd shoot the buggers. Now that makes me racist in the Brit eyes, but I don't care what colour they are, whether they're black, white or khaki. It matters not to a darkie. Couldn't resist that one. But I dislike them not for the colour of their skins or which religions they adhere to, although Muslims are pushing it somewhat with me, but for the fact they have the utter nerve, and not the desperation that is meted out by the sympathetic media, to come over to where they are not needed or wanted in the first place. But clearly this message, which the BNP first muted after the National Front in the 50s, has come home to roost. Even members of Parliament are worried over the growing number of illegal asylum seekers when they in fact don't remain illegal long enough to deport. They either marry or vanish into the black employment market. That is, the cheap and illegal employment market. We have thousands of Thais, Filipinos and more recently Nepalese crowding out white care workers as they are employed by foreign-owned agencies who will not promote any white workers into the elderly or mentally infirm care or nursing homes. And this has been going on unchecked, like Muslim grooming, for the last 40 years. Tell me this is racist thinking from the ethnics and you'd be nearer the point. This is another step in the reduction of the UK as a country, and it's moving fast because it has the backing of the media, especially the TV audiences. All plays, programmes, quiz shows and more have to show an almost equal number of black, brown or mixed race faces, usually paired with a hapless white one, or else they fall foul of the wonderful and probably EU-funded Race Relations Act, which in short means that if you are white, you will not get any job if an ethnic, however new, off the banana boat applies with the same or even less qualifications. And this applies to acting as well, as many of our new programmes show. New and black does not necessarily mean Sidney Poitier or Paul Robeson. This too makes me a racist, as I can tell the difference, which must not be spoken of in polite society or what passes for it today. Our country has, in simple terms, accepted its fate, that of a multiracial hellhole in the making. We have sacrificed our land, our children, our history and our future to the preservation of many different and alien cultures and religions over the preservation of our own ever-dwindling and pathetic history, which is ever being remade to suit the new multicultural model, and which is despised by all parties concerned. That statement makes me still a racist, of course. While still beating on the drum of racism, listen to what I'm going to say about rules and regulations, and you'll be surprised at the authors. New immigration laws. 1. There'll be no special bilingual programmes in the schools. 2. All ballots will be in this nation's language. 3. All government businesses will be conducted in our language. 4. Non-residents will not have the right to vote no matter how long they are here. 5. Non-citizens will never be able to hold political office. 6. Foreigners will not be a burden to the taxpayers. No welfare, no food stamps, no health care or other government assistance programmes. Any burden will be deported. 7. Foreigners can invest in this country, but it must be an amount of at least equal to 40,000 times the daily minimum wage. 8. If foreigners come here and buy land, options will be restricted. Certain parcels, including waterfront property, are reserved for citizens naturally born into this country. 9. Foreigners may have no protests, no demonstrations, no waving of a foreign flag, no political organising, no bad-mouthing our Prime Minister or his policies. These will lead to imprisonment and deportation. 10. If you do come to this country illegally, you will be actively hunted and, when caught, sent to jail until your deportation can be arranged and all assets will be taken from you. Too strict? Those are the current immigration laws of most of the Muslim countries, and yet we allow their people into our country on practically a holiday visa, allow them to stay and breed more to take more money and more food out of our mouths and drain our benefit systems. We allow them family lives and free education, give them jobs and groups to join to mentor them. We allow them to commit crimes and jail them in our jails. We allow them to vote and form councils, and we allow them to build edifices for their own religions. We allow them to sexually abuse our children and buy homes and businesses after they have often run their previous owners into the ground. We allow their demonstrations against this country and its establishment without punishment or comment. We do so much for them, and yet we are stupid enough not to realise enough is already too much. It will never matter how much you did for them and other migrants, because they all, without exception now, regard it as a matter of course to get into the UK and ignore the international rule of, for genuine asylum seekers it is the next country from their original border, not thousands of miles away over land, sea and air to what has been advertised by greedy and stupid people in all parties as a better way of life. It used to be a better way of life for the true British and the migrants of 50 years ago, but now it is self-help heaven for the greedy and opportunistic foreigners that swarm over our country. Now that still makes me a racist, doesn't it? Now let's get this clear. Just because a person doesn't like foreigners by the bucketful arriving every day to take what is on offer, that does not make them racist. It means they've taken an alternative perspective to the easy come, easy not go mantras of the establishment and the media, most of whose members wouldn't live within miles of these people unless they married them. Let's get real here. The powers that be may promote the multiracial ethos for living, our entertainment and for the cultural propaganda of our children, but if push comes to shove and they were introduced to the general rubbish that passes for migrants who live here, and not the wealthy Arabs, obsequious Asians and corrupt Africans that smatter our elite in this country now, they would run a bloody mile, and indeed so would most of the so-called non-racist political parties. Now these parties, and I'm including UKIP primarily, do take anyone as long as they are either famous, wealthy, or if ethnic, a combination of both. But of course they will not take ex-BNP members. How is that for racism? Judging a person by their belief and not their skin. Even worse, in my book. Now, I believe in a form of diversity. a more natural form than the Coudenhove-Kalergi plan of mixing everyone up until they don't know or care who or what they are or from which culture they sprang. I don't go for that at all. No, my diversity starts with people staying in their own countries for the most part and concentrating all the efforts they spend in running away or protesting when they have arrived here to making their own countries better places to live in. Now, not everyone who comes here has the excuse of being a refugee, and in fact many throw away their passports and papers just so they cannot be deported. Well, no more on that one. Bung them back to France and they'll soon go home. Foreign aid should be brought down to a manageable level for us to manage it in their own countries and stop all benefits for all migrants over here, even those with jobs. I say this because many come over here straight into jobs provided for them either by their fellow countrymen or by our people eager to jump on the bandwagon. They still marry and breed and have no intention of leaving here when they retire. And it isn't the elderly Brits who the TV is talking about being a pain in the arse to the future generations, it's the old migrants because they will outnumber us by then. Successive governments have in fact made a gigantic stick with which to beat in the heads of the British, and it'll take hard choices and hard taskmasters to sort it out, and a toughness which the Brits don't have, thanks to the nanny state and the I deserve it all culture, all of which pander to migrants as well as to the plan. Is it too late to be a real racist? Encourage diversity in foreign countries instead of here. Organise and rule our borders with a rod of iron and no sympathy. Get our people to take pride in this country and not run it down. Install in our young some patriotism and not the soppy, happy-clappy sentimentality of the media. How long will it take before we Brits take responsibility for what we have allowed to happen so that we can all feel good about ourselves? We have not in reality done anything for 99% of our migrants because we've allowed them to recreate their religions, their food, their communities, their way of life and their squabbles in our country. Not their country, but our country. How stupid and short-sighted is that? And to make matters worse, we've gone into debt to do it and are still thinking about affordable homes with 20% off for mainly young migrants or migrant offspring, not our own poor white, not so young and miles off the property ladder Brits. We truly are the only country in the world that would allow this to happen without any new laws in place that aren't in place through the European Union, who needs to palm millions of migrants onto us anyway. In reality, unless Ebola strikes here or there is an Islamist revolt, I cannot see the Brits doing anything other than keep paying out, not complaining, and in fact being more racist than the migrants who come over. Because you have to hand it to them, they stick together against us. And we have never stuck together against anything since the last war, and even then it was thanks to the US we won a Pyrrhic victory. So Theresa May, take a leaf out of the Muslim countries and actually make some laws that we'll get rid of, not encourage more bastards in. In short, grow up and grow a really tough skin, as we in the streets have had to do for years. The time for ignorant racism is over. Now it is time for dedicated and realistic racism to take place. Our country and our time will come. And finally, the simple truths of life. Simple truth 1. Partners help each other undress before sex. However, after sex they always dress on their own. Moral of the story, in life no one helps you once you're screwed. Simple truth 2. When a lady is pregnant, all her friends touch the stomach and say congrats, but none of them come and touch the man's penis and say good job. Moral of the story, hard work is never appreciated. No underwear makes sense to me. A man came to visit his grandparents and he noticed his grandfather sitting on the porch in the rocking chair wearing only a shirt with nothing on from the waist down. "Grandpa, what are you doing? Your weenie's out in the wind for everyone to see," he exclaimed. The old man looked off in the distance without answering. "Grandpa, what are you doing sitting out here with nothing below the waist?" he asked again. The old man slowly looked at him and said, "Well, last week I sat out here with no shirt on and I got a stiff neck. This is your grandma's idea." 5 rules to remember in life. 1. Money cannot buy happiness, but it's more comfortable to cry in a Corvette than on a bicycle. 2. Forgive your enemy, but remember the arsehole's name. 3. If you help someone when they're in trouble, they will remember you when they're in trouble again. 4. Many people are alive only because it's illegal to shoot them. 5. Alcohol does not solve any problems, but then neither does milk. And there you have it. And remember, life is good. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I wish you all a very good night, and we will be with you Friday. Exploited, groomed, raped, trafficked, and no one wanted to talk about it because it wasn't politically correct. It didn't fit in with the multicultural experiment pushed by Labour, and we've seen the outcome of that in Rotherham, where at least 1,400 girls have been found to be abused, but no one was speaking up for them. I am not yet aware of any Labour politicians who have fallen on their swords, and local council members, and we're here to talk about it because people here are very annoyed. This is nothing to do with racial divides. This is about what happened. We live in one country where we have one law and everyone should be treated equally and fairly. The father of the main prosecution witness in the Rotherham child sex grooming scandal has accused Nigel Farage.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the #1 in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday 6th of October 2014. UKIP defend use of child grooming scandals for political gain ahead of Haywood and Middleton vote. 2,356 reports of missing kids in Tayside. Lancashire Councillor's special brief as part of exploiting the issue for political gain. The man whose daughter's testimony led to the prosecution of 9 Asian men and an overhaul of Crown Prosecution Service rules said that UKIP should stop using BNP-style tactics which are adding to the distress of local families. The BNP received 7% of the vote in the constituency in the last general election after more than 3,000 people voted for the BNP. World at 8. I would have thought having your daughter abused was much more distressing to families than trying to stop it. Of course, many of these families live next door to the abusers thanks to our lack of border control. 2,356 reports of missing kids in Tayside to avoid another Rotherham. Police raid unlicensed Islamic school in East London. Lloyds Bank set to axe thousands of jobs and close down more branches as it goes digital. Ibrahim Master, Lancashire's Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, investigated. Hong Kong democracy protests face test of stamina. Vladimir Putin's approval rate is still near an all-time high. Thought for the day, Eureka, I'm not a racist bastard. And finally, a few simple truths. UK News. UKIP defend use of child grooming scandals for political gain ahead of Haywood and Middleton vote. UKIP hopeful John Bickley has defended his use of leaflets about child grooming scandals in Rotherham and Rochdale following accusations he has drawn racial battle lines for political gain. The candidate was joined by party leader Nigel Farage to canvass residents at a shopping centre in Middleton ahead of the by-election next week. A father of a child who was a victim of gangs in the Rotherham area has condemned the Cheshire-based politician's actions and accused him of using BNP-style tactics to win the seat. Mr Bickley told we live in a free country. There is clearly an issue for many years in a lot of northern cities where predominantly young, white, vulnerable girls have been